Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Well, I have to tell you, I came, Maker Faire Bay Area just wrapped up 2 days ago, so I'm a little bit coming off that high of organizing, one of the largest gatherings of makers in the world, and it makes me a little bit irritable, a little testy, a little bit wanting to pick a fight. Not necessarily with you, but sometimes I do just wonder why this is so hard, and why isn't it everywhere, and why isn't everybody doing it? When I first thought of doing this and makers and stuff, it was just sort of seeing what people were doing. There weren't necessarily a lot of people, but they didn't all know each other. They didn't all recognize each other in the same way. And certainly they were using similar tools. And what I've talked about a lot, is how we build those tools as makers, use those tools, and how we develop a mindset. I think that is, in a sense, educationally what's really valuable here. But I wanted to kind of go into some new ground tonight, or not necessarily, deep or anything, but in many ways to talk about maker culture, because I think that's what's beyond those things. That's what happens when you put people together. And this conference being called the CrossRoads is, in some ways, making is its own crossroads, but I think what you see mostly, that it's a crossroads of art and craft and engineering and science and lots of things. But what you see at that crossroads are people. And that's actually what I find compelling. I'm not a great maker myself. I have no particular talent, although I like to do, make hot sauce or beer or wine or whatever, cook for my family. But I see that all connected. So that brings me up to techne. So I'm going to use 3 words to describe. These are all Greek words and lights flashing in my face. These are ancient ideas, really. And they use words that we may or may not be familiar with, but obviously techne is the root of technology. But they also use the word craft and art and know-how. When I started the magazine, that's kind of my idea was modern technology and old technology, they all relate to each other. We can learn low-tech and high-tech, and knitting is a technology. Cooking is a technology. But so is our cell phones, and so are electronics and digital fabrication. And there's a certain know-how around that I wanted to share. In cooking, it's recipes, and in Make Magazine, it's basically recipes again. Here's how I did it, and here's how you might do it. I think the difference in our magazine was we wanted to create things that other people could replicate. So we tried to figure out that it would be something that was possible. However, we didn't try to do things that were necessarily easy for you. And that may or not be good for circulation, but it was things that are hard are kind of engaging and interesting and worth doing. Things that are really easy. Like, I try to incorporate DIY and the idea of there, but fixing your toilet is not something that's that much fun. You have to do it. But, creating some of the projects in Make Magazine were adventurous and cool. The other Greek word is praxis, and I wanted to focus on the practical stuff, things that you could do. Not just talk about it or not just wave your hands in the air, but also there was a lot of thought in how you did it. But end of the day, I love the word practice, and I love thinking about making as a practice. And last, this might be unusual for you. Xenia, it's the root word of xenophobia, so fear of foreigners or fear of strangers. Xenia is more the opposite. Love of people we don't know very well. Welcoming, kindness. What I found interesting about community is not people who are related to each other, not even people who went to the same school or in the same discipline. It's people who really didn't know each other except through their interests or except through what they found out to be in common. And I think those are in a way, the ingredients of maker culture. And I don't know necessarily any better way to kind of talk about it, because I think words are kind of meaningless. I'd rather show you pictures. These are pictures from the last two Maker Fairs last year. And I want you to just, in your own mind, ask yourself what's going on here. What do you see? What do you see in these faces? And what are they doing? What do they feel? What do they represent? Who's there? Who's not there? Why are they doing these things? I didn't put any music to this. I didn't put any narrative. I don't quite know what to say about a lot of them. But I do know that there's something human here, something real. And it doesn't look like school. There's a lot of passion here. There's a lot of fun here. Humor. It's a project from Tokyo called Big Head. And in the midst of a Maker Faire with thousands of people all around you, you find something that gets your attention and you focus on it. And you start doing something. And our young kids are with parents. And they're showing each other. What I love here is I'm assuming it's a mother, but she's doing it as well as her kid. And they're looking at what they're doing together. And these kids, some kind of Hot Wheels track. Some kind of crazy race that looks like has a San Francisco van from it. And this is some art exhibit where you speak into a microphone and those hands clap for you. I saw the cardboard dancing robot at Maker Faire again this year. It's the kind of silly thing I don't know it teaches you anything particular except to dance. Sharing things you make. This is one of my favorite ones. It's kind of a diorama or a dollhouse made out of cassette tapes and little bunnies. All kinds of things that people make. 3D printed or knitted. Strange things that roll around. Using different tools, interacting in different ways. Really of all ages. Of course, we have fire. That was one of my favorite ones, a flaming saxophone. I mean, who thinks of that? Where does this stuff come from? It comes from our community. And I think the thing I'm most proud about at Maker Faire is I don't ask anybody to do anything for Maker Faire. I just ask them to bring what they're already doing. There's no prize, there's no challenge, there's no reward except to share with other people. And often to share what you know with other people. And this was some kind of thing, I don't know what it is, but I saw that young person there just happy as could be. It's just how the simplest things are opportunities to learn. And you get to be an astronaut. You get to do things. Play 3D printed musical instruments. Or have a robot play guitar. And I think fundamentally we see a lot of hands-on things because they're interactive. You get to touch, you get to control, you get to do things. I don't know quite what we're measuring in that one, but it looks pretty good. This is from last year in the Bay Area. An oversized jack that's really a balloon and you can flip it around. And then a robot Kermit riding a bike. Kids using a Raspberry Pi computer. Art. Beautiful LED POV dress. Soldering. You tell me what that is. Marshmallow shooters. This one I love because of the touch. Can I touch your mermaid costume? It's an old projector. And there was some fellow there that was presenting them, and these kids had never seen a film projector before. And they were fascinated by it. How does it work? How do you thread film through? Do any of you remember that? This is a piano that lights up when you play it. R2-D2, stormtroopers. I don't know what that is. Mechanical robot drummers, sharks on bikes, snails, glass something or other. There's our makey-makeys, if you play oranges. So I'm just trying to share, like, how many different things are going on here, and yet they all belong at Maker Faire. They don't fit into a department. They don't fit really into a field. Some are silly. Some are just interactive. Some are like this one that, if you really look closely, it's kind of scary. We have some strange makers out there. And so, I think what I love to see are these hands. I watch hands and faces at Maker Faire. Hands tell me if you're interacting. Faces tell me almost the effect of that. Kind of what I want to talk a little bit tonight, is we really undervalue hands. Sometimes we say hands-on, but we don't think that's like AI, right? Hands is just like messy and finger painting and maybe stuff you do when you're young. You maybe give it up and you don't need it. But Montessori says the hands are the instruments of our intelligence. It's a wonderful word, instruments. That's an instrument, right? We can do all kinds of things with our hands. Our hands are wired to our brain like no other part of our body. So when our hands are active and engaged, our minds are engaged. And I think we have a lot to learn from Maria Montessori, and I know we all know who she is, but did you know she was first an engineer? And then she became a doctor, a physician, a clinical physician, and she worked in asylums. And we think of her, obviously, through childhood education, but that's not where she started. She was working in asylums, and they put the mentally disabled in rooms by themselves, and really in isolation with nothing else in them. And they literally threw the food at them. And they kind of mocked them for the way those people played with their food instead of eating it. And it was Montessori's observation that play was stimulation, was a way of them interacting with something other than themselves. And she took it as a sign of their intelligence and that they could actually be developed into normal or intelligent, be viewed as intelligent human beings that were worth educating. And so she actually succeeded at that. She began working with them. And she realized that she actually brought them up to and exceeding whatever that standard is that was present at the time. And I find that really motivating. She then said, this will work for normal kids or regular kids, if I'm using the wrong things. And she said she tried to do that, but she couldn't find anyone that would listen to her. And then the reason she got to work with young kids was someone had heard that she was interested in working with kids, and it was a business developer building a building. And there were a lot of kids between the ages of 3 and 6 that were not in school and were running in and around the site that they were trying to develop. It was causing them problems, and it was causing them money. So they said, what if we give you a room and you bring those kids in and begin to work with them? And she didn't know really what she was going to do with them, but she began figuring that out. And I think that the key for me and if you looked at those photos, is observation. As a clinician, she was a good observer. And she began to figure out what kids needed, what they were interested in. And she noticed that they really liked practical things. And she developed really this whole idea that children are motivated. They're motivated doers. They like to do things. They're naturally that way. Do we think that way in education? I think we have to make them do something, or that they're a blank slate. She saw the teacher as an observer, an organizer, and she saw, most importantly, the environment as something that would be designed around student interests and needs. She wasn't trying to think about the schools or the system. She was thinking about the kids and what they needed and what kind of learning was good for them. And I can't emphasize enough that is seemingly, or sadly, the polar opposite of how we think about our schools. It's what the schools need and what the teachers need and various other things, what our society needs or the future needs or career needs. Here are 6 Montessori principles. I'm not really trying to teach you these principles, but they actually do echo the maker movement, and these are not my words. These are someone else's. Movement and cognition are closely intertwined, and movement can enhance thinking and learning, so you don't want kids sitting down. Learning and well-being are improved when people have a sense of control over their lives. They get to make decisions for themselves. People learn better when they are interested in what they are learning. So organize around what kids are interested in. Tying extrinsic rewards to an activity, like money for reading or high grades for tests, negatively impacts motivation to engage in activity when the reward is withdrawn. She understood gamification, or why it doesn't really work. Collaborative arrangements can be very conducive to learning, and learning situated in meaningful context is often deeper and richer than the learning in abstract context. So, again, you can take those however you want, but this is someone, just like John Dewey, and just like most of the constructivists, really, we're speaking really singing from the same hymnal, right, in terms of what this is. But it is not how our schools are designed. This is marginal. And yet, I put the pictures together because I was giving a talk to the Montessori Teacher Association, a national conference they were doing in March, and I wasn't sure if they understood making quite the same way or what Maker Faire was, so I did that. I certainly wouldn't tell them what the principles of Montessori are, but I wanted to learn more about them, and the more I learned about her, the more, she's very interested in education of the senses, and which I've written about in the past in my book, that, kids actually seem somewhat deprived. It's a touchscreen generation that's doing this most of the time. They don't know hot and cold in quite the same way, and soft and hard and rough and smooth. These are things that Montessori was quite conscious about presenting and organizing. But I think the other reason I wanted to bring up Montessori was, if you go type in, how do you become a Montessori teacher? You get back a bunch of places that will credential you. And it's basically, hey, we have programs to credential you. And that might be the future of where maker education is headed. But I'd like you to think back to Montessori's experiences, where they were grounded in her own experience and observation, and ask why your own maker education practice isn't grounded in that experience. Someone I heard earlier, was talking about how, hey, when he works with these kids, this gentleman over here, I forget your name, you were talking about, pardon me? Jerry, you were talking about how you see it in the kids. You see it, right? When you're doing making education, you see it in the kids. And I don't give a crap what the data is or what the standards are or what the next generation this or that is. We do it for the kids. and the impact it has on their lives. And the administrators and others that don't get that, it's too bad. And that's the fight I'm in, or we're in, I believe, to justify to them something that's working so well for kids. Well, it's not just Montessori that's talked about these things. It's Mitch Resnick, who spoke at Maker Faire this past weekend. You know, he certainly gets it. He's in the long thread through having worked with Seymour Papert. He talks about working on projects based on their passions in collaboration with peers in a playful spirit. It's doing real work, but it's also play. That's the thing that's so interesting to me. But I want, before I leave Montessori, I want to just make I started that comment about how do you learn to become a Montessori teacher? And I think one of the real challenges all of us have that are trying to teach kids, obviously Montessori believed kids are their own teachers, and that's why she thought of you as an observer. But you have to figure out what the practice is that allows the kids to discover the things that you value. So if we value a maker mindset, and we value things like agency or resilience, well, we don't do that by putting up a slide and saying, here's what it is, right? That doesn't mean anything. Think of the thing they say to writers, show, not tell, right? Or more importantly, discover or experience. How do they experience agency? How do they experience resilience? Well, it has to do with failure, has to do with frustration, and their ability to recover from that. A teacher who intervenes and helps a student solve a problem by giving them an answer does not create resilience. So that's the practice that educators need to learn, and it doesn't look a lot like teaching. I would just say that I think, if there's one thing to leave you with particularly is to trust the play of making, that does an awful lot for you, that the play is what matters to the kid, and the play is what the magic is. So I worry, and I've seen a little bit in education sometimes, it's a bit, I'll use a thing like design thinking. Sounds good, looks good. If you go to a high-end private school, design thinking. We won't even call our lab a makerspace. It's an innovation lab, right? If you don't have enough money, it's a makerspace, right? And, inevitably the teacher gets up there and says, here's the 4 steps for design thinking. Ideation, There'll be a test tomorrow. Well, I want you to tell me what those 4 things are. Now, formalisms are okay, but don't teach the kid the formalism. Introduce them to the experience. What's a design experience look like? If they've not had that experience, design thinking doesn't make a whole lot of sense to them. And you can talk about it without putting 4 bullets up there. It's to have an idea. Try to make it real. Try it again. Change it. Try it again. That's not too fancy. But sometimes educators and others like to wrap things up so they look more important to funders. Right? So we actually had a really nice talk. I don't know if they're here with a couple of folks here earlier, but we had this question. It's like, what could making look like? And I had prepared this, and I was, if there's one thing that our culture sort of embraces, it's sport. And for most kids, sport is something they want to do. I remember being in Atlanta once, talking to the Blank Foundation. They said, boy, that doesn't matter who you are, where you live in Atlanta, but you almost have to fight off people to not play football. It's everywhere. And you have to look about it. Sport probably gets diversity better than almost anything in America. In terms of participation, nothing's perfect. And there's certainly a history of exclusion. But you look at almost any sport, male, white male, women, white women, and increasingly people from other races and ethnicities. Because at some level, everybody can participate. Parents seem to get it. But I think that if I could imagine in making that we had this infrastructure, we would have, for every kid, the facilities. We would have leagues or teams that you could join. And we would have coaching. We're not that far away from that, though. And the funny thing is, and this is for my STEM friends out there, there's not but a teeny tiny chance that any of those people playing sports will become professionals. It's infinitesimal. So why do they do that? And particularly, why do kids do it? Because they get to play. At any age, you walk on the field, and soccer or basketball, you don't study the sport for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and then they say, now you're ready to play. Even music. We give the kid an instrument. We don't say music theory's down the hall, take 101, and then you'll be ready to learn guitar. So flip practice and theory and make it about practice. I think the other thing is just this idea of amateurs. Sports are full of amateurs. We like to believe it's about the professionals, but that's a really small top. But what's organized in our community is for amateurs. Not just for kids, also adults, right? Where you can play in rec leagues. Unfortunately, there are the one thing about sports that I'd like to not inherit, I think it's overly competitive, and which means people drop off when they don't make the varsity or whatever it is. But there usually are opportunities in the community. So it's just as a model, it's something to think about. And sports are extracurricular. But yet somehow they fit into sports. You go to pick a school website, and probably the sports scores are on the first page. Look for the science fair. Look for something else. You won't see it. Another speaker we had at Maker Faire was Ted Dintersmith, and he just came out with a book, What School Could Be. If you saw the documentary, Most Likely to Succeed, he was the executive producer of it. He was a venture capitalist, wealthy guy, wanted to fund change in education. He went around. And I'm not going to read all these for you, but these are some of the points that he says he's making in this book. But I think the first one, the purpose of U.S. education is to rank human potential, not to develop it. I think it's true. And you know what? The system is terrible at knowing how to rank people. If this was a sport, they'd have the worst kids on the field. They don't know how to look for talent. And they don't get rewarded for it. There's no system for that. And I want making to be about developing potential, because we don't know who those innovators are, and we don't know who they'll become. I don't care whether they'll be CS majors or ceramicists, as long as it's what they want to do. Now, can I ask you, how many of you are involved in the community colleges? You are? Good. And I know Carol is, and you are. Great. I want to kind of just wrap by talking a little bit about, I believe that community colleges are a great place for us to expand the maker movement, if you will, or to really reach kids that have not been ranked, or at least ranked well. They're the kids that haven't been picked. The team didn't pick them. The Berkeleys and Stanfords didn't want them. And yet they go there and they don't often know what they're going to do, because they kind of get the same educational diet they got in high school, and it's boring. But we've started to see maker spaces. With Carol's efforts, the CCC Maker program started, and the state funded 24 maker spaces at community colleges in California. And we've just started to see them over the last year. Now, to give you an example of the inequities that we live in, Berkeley has a maker space. It's called the Jacobs Design Institute. More money was spent on that building than all 24 community colleges. And they got 1,000 students going, registered as users, which is great. But these community colleges can reach, each one of them, tens of thousands of people, or collectively tens of thousands of people. So I'm going to come back to this. This is Sacramento City Makerspace. And as someone that has worked on this for so long, when I go to a website and say, we are makers, and it's a public community college, you don't know how good that makes me feel. I'm going to just tell you, there's one other thing I just want to tell you a little bit about. Maker Faire this year, on Friday we've had an education day. I usually bus kids in because I want them to get the experience of making and see what's going on there. And we've done that for a long time. It's pretty hectic, it's pretty crazy. This year, we had 50 schools apply to be at Maker Faire, to bring projects and exhibit, just as normal makers. And again, when I started this, most of my makers were male. Most of them were adults. And we had to create programs, partly with Maker Ed, to get young makers to, we had plenty of kids there, but I wanted them to see other kids as makers. But now we have middle schools from Oakland and private schools and public schools all participating. So I've been focusing a little bit on getting kids into making, and now I want to focus more on what are the outcomes? What do you get from if you're learning to do this? And I think you get a lot. But I created this industry career and college day. We had about 1,300 junior and seniors in high school and some community college folks and others that I don't know where they came from. But we had a little kind of maker job fair. And we had some colleges, community colleges there. And we had hands-on activities and experiences for them. And I was delighted to see both their interest and their maturity. And we particularly focused on kids that I thought are not coming to Maker Faire. And we had talks about the future of work. Because really what I'm trying to talk about here is there is not a job waiting for them here that I could train them for. Because the world of work is changing and so is education. So how do you prepare for that future? And it's got to be something that they own. I'm so delighted. Even kids showed up with projects they'd been making at school. This was Nicole, who had a ukulele she made with a laser cutter. But a lot of the kids, this is their first experience of making. And that's terribly important. And I think in education, we sometimes, what's the right age to hit them? I want them at any age. But this is an important age, too, this high school, community college age, where they're kind of deciding, what options do they have? I believe by being a maker, they have a lot more options than anybody has told them about. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you a short video, and this goes back to the community college, Sacramento City College. And this is their makerspace. It's a short video about the creation of the makerspace. But use my other analogy about sport. Think of this as, a college creating their own video about their sports team and their great athletic facilities, and the team that comes together to play. And the students created this video as well as mine. You'll tell by the music choice. But just think of it in that case, because it's just not kids coming to take a course. It's kids coming to really play in a makerspace.
I first came into the makerspace and I was getting into it, I felt like, okay, I found a place where I can work on my purpose, like whatever ideas that I have that I come into my head, now I can go over here and actually try to do something with that and make something out of it. And it's really, like, it's definitely what I would like to do for a living, because, like, that's just, I want to be an inventor, and this is a place where I can really explore that field. Whereas otherwise, if it wasn't for this, I couldn't. There's nowhere else to go to do what I want to do here.
One of the main problems even running the club for a year is like having a space, you know, to meet somewhere indoors, away from the rain, somewhere a little bit more private, but also something that has this kind of equipment here. Like, this is like state-of-the-art technology.
Coming from like a low-income neighborhood where like I look at the price of like 3D printers, I could never afford one on my own. So to have these actually here and be able to use, that's amazing. And for free, like, what more can a person ask?
The makerspace, as soon as its arrival on campus, I could already feel that it was going to be an impact.
A lot of our work is student to student, so as a student I have to reel in other people that could potentially be students here, and I think makerspace would be a good idea to show people some of the potential of our intellectual creativity here.
Especially reaching out to the local businesses and finding ways to have students go out there and do work in the real world for a client, and sitting there and creating a portfolio for themselves so that when they step out of college, they actually have job experience of some sort.
Because it's different between when you're building it and designing it in 3D versus building it in real life, you know? So yeah, just a place where my imagination can come through.
This is an opportunity for me to present my full potential about my ideas, designs, and inventions. Obviously, I don't have CNC routers and 3D printers at home, but I have a lot of ideas, so here I can actually bring them to life.
I see this makerspace as being a collaborative space for people to come and share skills and have their own set of skills, but learn how to work with other people and learn that when you do make things together, it turns out way better than you would have done on your own.
Ladies and gentlemen, 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 your attention, please, your attention, please, attention, please.
And now the moment we've been waiting for is here.
So anyway, you see, I think, I'm really hopeful that, the thing that I'm really happy about that is they built it themselves. Guess who built the Jacobs Design Center? Not the students, not the faculty. Professional architects and designers came in and did that. But these people put the tables together. They put this on the wall. And that teaches them the kind of things that we value in the maker community. So sometimes it is an advantage not to have the same kind of money, to be, having to do it yourself. And I can't thank Carol enough for her team that has made really that happen. I'm just there to enjoy it. But I think this last thing I'll just say is, like, why don't more people know about this? Why don't people see this? And, those kids, I went there and saw them. I had a different video that I was going to show you, but when you hear them talk, that one young man, there's a second on there, he created the signs in the space. He's the art director, and he told me about his story, that he was a graffiti artist in Texas, and he got arrested. He said, I made my living doing billboards. And he said, no, I did it for fun. But he got arrested, and he was given the opportunity of going to prison for 7 years or going back to school. And he only learned, to use a computer a year ago, and now he's using all the tools to create designs that were beautiful. And I had a term that I explained to them. Something I saw in Shanghai. I was at a lunch, and this guy was, he ran a gallery, he was a photographer, he was a maker, an artist, all these things. And someone said, he's a slash man. What's that? Artist / maker / and I think that's the future. Not that we have defined by a single title, but when Cisco was there, he said, I'm a slash man. I'm an artist, a father, a student leader, and all these things. And in some ways, I hope the maker movement gives rise to a generation of Slash people. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much.
Yeah. That was amazing. So we can do 3 questions again. So if you have a question, if you'd raise your hand, our runners. We have one up here in the front, right here. If you'd stand up and say your name, organization, and ask your question.
Hello, thank you so much. I'm a CS person and I didn't run out the room, okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Loretta Cheeks and I have an organization called Strong Ties, working with youth. And I do both making and also CS, because I think you need all of it.
I do too.
With that being said, what would be a good kind of like, not an argument, but a reasoning about just the hands-on, because traditionally hands-on was for the laborer or the low workers, and the other thinking, as you've kind of alluded, innovation, language matters, innovation versus maker. But how do you reason about like just the whole idea of making, and particularly for Black and brown communities as it pertains to vocation, especially when you're talking about community colleges, because oftentimes they do end up at the lower wage, as lower wage earners. That's it.
Good. Well, there's a lot in that question. The hands-on part, I simply think if you watch kids respond to things and look at them, it's engaging them, right? And it's giving them a sense of control. And here's the big thing that I love about making is the kids get feedback. Just like when you're playing a sport and you kick the ball and it goes somewhere, when you make a circuit and you put the pieces together, it lights up or it doesn't. So these kind of things, rather than the teacher having to say, oh, you did that well, so they know right away you did it well. Last word, you use the word vocation, and I actually think we need to change what that means, or at least rethink that. Because it's true, we used to have shop classes, home ec and other things, and we've wiped them out and nobody cared. And some degrees maker spaces are coming back in, sometimes for design and engineering, but also for kids that actually need to use their hands. And these are not just, I don't really care about the kids going to MIT, but kids on the autistic spectrum, they're not paying attention in class the way you want them to do, but they will make things. And they will learn by watching someone else. ESL, they will learn from watching others. So this form of making it has lots of learners in it. And I think it'd be very inclusive. But, the Latin word for vocation is vocare, is a calling. I think that's where we need to redefine it. Like, what are you called to do? Not just that there are jobs out there for you, but what talents do you have that you care about? And that's when I think of those community college students, if we could introduce them, and they even, not so much any formal way, but just from each other, they begin to be identified for having talents, just as you might play second base on a baseball team, and they say, boy, you can really field or hit. Another question?
Some of the research studies that I've read on makerspaces speak to the differences in experiences young people have when there's someone at the site who can help them learn how to do what they want to do that's complex and learn to use tools and technologies that they don't know of, and different when that expertise isn't at the site for young people. Yeah, and so you touched on that when you talked about you'd like to see it move to like sport where there's leagues and coaching and that sort of thing. And so I think that would get at what the research suggests. So my question for you is like, how do we get from where we are today, where those leagues and teams and coaching supports are available at Makerspace?
So I think the thing I'm going to focus on is how to develop coaches. And it's to some degree the Montessori program, and it's not about how to learn to use the 3D printer. They may or may not have that. We can do that. But it is how do you. I really think that the challenge, like in many ways, kids can learn online, they can find out the content or the skill parts. It's really how do you help them develop an idea? How do they learn to get good? Like, the kid says, this is my idea and it's not very good, right? Or I tried that and it didn't work. It's all that is coaching. It's not instruction. And that's what I'm trying to really draw the difference. And I think mentoring is obviously in that and important. And the biggest asset we have is actually the community. And we don't leverage it quite enough, right? Because there are people in this community, I mean, you see that at Maker Faire, that know how to do things. And they care about it. They might work at Google by day, but they're building Tesla coils by night. Okay? Thank you. And I think right there is the other question.
My name's Ryan Robidoux. I'm a computer science teacher in Massachusetts, but is at a vocational school.
Yeah.
And in our state, every student has access to vocational education, but there's a large debate on how to actually showcase what their skills are. So they have to come up with a portfolio, there's competencies. So what suggestions would you have for us for a portfolio system, or how students can show employers what they've done over the years and what format that might be?
Yeah. So I think this is the big shift that's happening kind of in STEM and making, is that it's going to be less and less about the transcript and the college essay, and even from a career point of view, it's going to be more about what kind of stuff can you do and what demonstrates that. So I saw that at Maker Faire. People are there with their stuff, and they meet other people and say, you can do that with drones? I've got a company that needs that kind of work. And largely the tech industry has been really good at that, in the sense of places like GitHub, which are repositories for code that if you want an employee that knows that open source package, you look and see who the committers are, right? We built a platform called MakerShare, makershare.com. That is, my goal was to take the makers from Maker Faire and give them a portfolio, and so that they can grow over time. And it's also intended for school use, so that you could set up a group of kids and have them create that. The thing that I'm looking for is, how to create history, a record of your making. So we can see what you did in 8th grade, 9th grade, and 10th grade. Now, if a kid wants to hide any of that, it should be all under their control. But they might want to show their own growth and look at that. And it has different uses there. MIT, for instance, allows you to submit a maker portfolio as a supplement, just as if you were a musician or an artist. You can tell them about that other work. Why? Well, they'd like to have more makers, but they have classes like in machine design that they have students in there that have never really worked with a machine. And professors are asking, can we get some kids in here that actually know how to do things? So I think that's a way, if you go to art school, you don't just take an aptitude test. You show up with a portfolio of art that you've done. And I think that's a big change. And it's going to, I think, benefit a lot more people. Those that aren't necessarily doing extremely well on tests. Now, MIT is still going to make you look, you have to have the test scores. But at least they're able to see another dimension. But I think at our other schools, they're going to see the kid more real. And I think this is better than badging and certification. That can also be added. But I think the main thing is, what do you do? What have you built? So that's one. There are some others maybe out there, but that's an important thing. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'll hang around if you have any personal questions.